Rovio. It's a gaming company, or originally was a gaming company. But Rovio now is actually an entertainment company with games at heart. I come from the learning division, the learning unit of Rovio. And today I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we're doing in that space, how we're doing it, and I'd like to describe two approaches that we have to learning. One thing that's important to state when we're talking about education, that it's so very important to understand that part of education is global. We're similar in so many ways, but so many parts of the educational content and the educational context are and always must be local. So it's important to understand that whatever we're doing in the educational space, what we need to try and strive for is to understand the differences, understand the similarities, and celebrate those in order for us all to learn. I'm so lucky to have two top brands in my hands when I'm working at Rovio. Rovio is a company based in Finland. And Finland, a very tiny country of about 5.5 million people, but we are truly a superpower in education. And we also have the Angry Birds brand in our hands. The Angry Birds brand is a global brand. People know it, recognize it, and are very active with our brand. Kids and adults alike, they draw these characters, they bake cakes with the characters, they interact with us through social media. They're doing things with the characters, and they did so even before they knew that these characters had a world or names. And for me, coming from an educational publishing background, that was an unbelievable observation to see that. One interesting thing about Rovio and Angry Birds is also the unbelievable reach. We have more than 2.8 billion downloads of Angry Birds games. We have 170 million monthly active users. We have more than 4 billion views of the animations, the tunes that we have embedded in games, so that is a stretch. What can we learn, we educationalists, from the gaming industry? What can we learn from the technology capabilities of these guys? And what can we learn from the engaging capabilities that the entertainment world has? Not so much entertaining as such, but engaging, activating people, getting people excited about something, inspiring people. Working in education, again, very important to understand that we cannot export Finnish education, and we don't even want to. Education has to be born where we are. But we can learn from a country like Finland. And a country like Finland wants to learn from the rest of the world. We all have to be looking at the future of education. We can't be looking back at the way we used to do things. Finland was good in education, but we must go on, go forward, learn more to be able to be at the front of the education also in the future. So what we could not do is put these two things together and start talking about global education or change in education. We cannot put an Angry Birds sticker on something and call that future learning. So we had to start doing research and development on these issues. And 3.5 years ago, we started talking about what our approach should look like. And we asked ourselves, what if learning was fun? Kind of like a stupid question, because we really feel that learning is fun. Learning is fun. But learning is not a synonym for school. We don't often enough have fun in school, but we could. We could have fun in school because learning itself is fun. Learning is engaging. We found 7 statements that we believe should be true for learning actually to be fun. Learning is fun when you love what you do, when you have a passion for something, or the intrinsic motivation to do something, to put in the work that's necessary for us to learn. That's actually also a Rovio-related statement. In 2003, Peter Westerbacka, our mighty eagle, who sends his greetings but couldn't come here today, he, in 2003, organized a gaming competition, and this young student, Niklas Hed, and a couple of his student friends took part in that competition. They developed the world's first multiplayer mobile game, and they won that competition. And then they went up to Peter and asked, okay, so we won this competition, but so what? Peter very smartly asked Niklas, what is it that you really love? What are you passionate about? What do you want to do? And Niklas said, well, we love playing these games and developing them. Peter told Niklas and the guys to start a company, and that company is Rovio. So for us in the learning team, success is a synonym for learning. If you love what you do, or you have intrinsic motivation like small children have to learn to walk, you do succeed, you learn. And that brings us to the statement number 7, again, tied to Niklas and his story. Learning is fun when it's fun to fail, or at least it's okay to make mistakes. The guys started the company and they started developing games, game after game after game. 51 games later, the company was going under, no commercial success, so it looked like a failure. But then they put all their learnings together, they really focused, and then they developed the 50-second game, which is Angry Birds. And again, like with small kids learning how to walk, they fall down, they bump themselves, they bruise themselves, it hurts. They have the intrinsic motivation to learn how to walk. Niklas and his friends had the love and passion for doing something, and they did succeed, they learned. Learning is fun when you can choose how you learn. We all have different kinds of learning strategies. It's very important to understand those. And we need to be able to make choices in our lives. I learn differently from you, and even I learn differently depending on what I'm learning at what point of my life. Choice is important. And learning is fun when we feel safe. Safety in this global context means safety after a trauma, so very physical question. It also means privacy issues and non-bullying questions, both in the virtual, digital, and then the physical space. And learning is fun when learning itself becomes a healthy addiction. Our PR team told me that I can't use the word addiction in connection with games. It's an ugly word, but I think it's such a good word describing what we really want to accomplish. We want to addict people to lifelong learning so that they constantly will want to learn more. It would be wrong for us to tell the young kids of today that, okay, it will be enough for you to, study up to a certain degree and then you're set for life, because they won't be. They will need to learn and learn more constantly. We do not have a clue of what challenges they have facing them in the future, so we need to addict them to lifelong learning. Learning is fun when we're all appreciated who we are. It's important in a classroom environment for the kids to understand, to appreciate each other, and it's very important for us who are working in this type of a global context to really appreciate the differences and understand them as far as we can. Learning is fun when the environment is inspiring, and with the environment we mean both the physical and the digital environment. The classrooms of today, they just have to change. And we have to pay attention to the digital environments of learning to inspire people and to make learning as fun as we can. Again, the end goal is to addict people to learning. We appreciate the fact that people have different kinds of lists of knowledge items. People have curricula in their country and nations and schools or institutions and whatnot, and that's fine. We're more interested in the 21st century skills and want to embed these in everything that we do. The most important thing is to learn, helping the kids, helping ourselves to learn the way we learn, most effectively having fun. And with fun, we definitely do not mean frivolous fun or watching a show and enjoying that and laughing at something. We mean actively being engaged in something, wanting to do more, wanting to do the repetition that's necessary for learning. 21st century skills like communication and participation, citizenship, critical thinking. This list of 21st century skills happens to be the list that we have put together with the University of Helsinki Teacher Education Department, and these will be the goals of the next Finnish national curriculum start at the beginning of 2016. We wrote about our background, the philosophy of fun and what we mean by fun. Lauri Jarvilehto, PhD philosopher and author, he will be talking a little bit more about this. This book is not about Finnish learning. This book is not about the Rovio way of learning. It's a collection of stories, cases out there that try and help us explain and also ourselves understand how engaging, playful, and fun learning really is an effective way of taking us forward. Another very important part in our work and approach is research. We work together with the University of Helsinki, and we have started this fun learning research lab within the teacher education department of that university. And we're opening 2 more universities in different parts of the world. What we want to do is make sure that fun, innovative learning solutions, products, pedagogical approaches are researched, and that message also travels throughout the world. So we're taking part in starting a network of laboratories to make sure that what we understand with fun also helps others understand it and teaches us more about that. Education is so important that we can't take it too frivolously. We have to make sure that it is constantly researched. But we can't wait for something to be researched for 5 years until we start. We need to start today. The kids are here today. We're doing something right now making sure that what we do is researched as we go forward. Then I promised to talk about two products that we have, two approaches. One is Angry Birds Playground. This is a kindergarten program. It's based on the fun learning philosophy, based on the Finnish expertise in early years. UNESCO has ranked us #1 in the most affordable, high-quality provider of early childhood education, and that's something that we're very proud of. So based on that knowledge, and then taking that forward. We train teachers, again, together with the University of Helsinki. Our first batch of teachers trained in China. Picture of the future classroom where technology is embedded in the actual environment. The environment itself is a story. We believe in reading, so we continue working with our wonderful book partners, National Geographic Society, who develop nonfiction books, age-appropriate stuff for these children to enjoy when they're inspired about something. We work on book projects with NASA and with CERN to make sure that the smallest of the children get the highest of quality when they read. And we also, of course, use technology in the classrooms. And again, we want the kids to understand how to use technology creatively. How can they be active, creative, innovative, not passive consumers of something that someone's pushing their way, but actively working, actively understanding how the world works. This comprehensive program is part of our path in trying to help teachers understand how to build technology in a very natural way into the everyday lives of the children. The other product that I'd like to mention today, which has something to do with learning, and now I have to read from the paper because our PR department told me that I can tease you with something but not say too much. We have a game called Angry Birds Space, and that game is actually already used in classrooms all over the world for many different purposes. Some people teach language with it. Some help kids write stories with the game. Some teach physics with the game. There are many things that people see in that game that brings the game into the classrooms. But we've been taking a closer look at Angry Birds Space, and this summer we're going to do something interesting with our friends at NASA. So let's keep our eyes on space. Angry Birds Space. And now I'd like to ask Lauri Jarvilehto, PhD and philosopher, author, to the stage and to tell you more about the science behind fun learning. Lauri, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lauri Jarvilehto. For the last 3.5 years, we've been looking into how to create fun learning. About 3.5 years ago, Sanna contacted me, and she had this idea that this massive success of the Angry Birds could be leveraged for some equally massive good. So we started looking into the fun of learning. And this resulted in the book that was published last year called Learning as Fun. There's a somewhat unfortunate event that happened this February. Because about 2.5 months ago, I realized that the title of the book is wrong. The whole idea that we need to take learning and to make it fun is wrong. We don't need to funify learning. We don't need to gamify learning. We don't need to anyfy learning. Because learning is fun. Learning is, in fact, one of the most awesome experiences we can have as human beings. Think about it. Think about those moments when you realize something, when the blocks click together. That moment of aha, that moment of eureka. These are those little flashes of light that make our lives worth living. And this is learning. If you take a look at a small child, they get these flashes all the time. They're learning every single day. And what we realized in February was that the only challenge we have in generating next generation learning is to generate learning, period. But we've discovered that learning doesn't happen if you put children in rows and let them look at the backs of each other and bring somebody who's not one single bit interested in what they're teaching to give a monologue about it. So there's nothing wrong about learning. There's something wrong about the way we've approached learning. Namely, we have all these fantastic theories about education. But it doesn't matter one single bit how much you educate, how well you educate in terms of the best theories out there, if no learning happens. But to flip it the other way around, if learning happens, it doesn't matter if you facilitated learning by standing on your nose and whistling a children's song backwards. So this is what we're after. We want to facilitate learning. Now, in 2012, when we started this research project that resulted in my book, we realized that there is not much empirical research on leveraging games, especially mobile games, in learning. Well, that's not a big surprise because mobile games hit the market in any bigger sense only at around 2009. So we started looking at theoretical work. Well, for a philosopher, that's about the best you can get. I started looking into the theory of flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the self-determination theory of intrinsic motivation by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan. We looked into the concept of mindsets by Carol Dweck, and various other theoretical frameworks. We looked into a lot of neuroscience, neuroplasticity. And it turns out that this intuition that Sanna had, she was certainly onto something. Because it turns out that games, when they're done the right way, they activate almost the all same things you need to activate to create learning. Now at the foundation, learning is a very simple affair. To quote a very famous and renowned Austrian authority on learning, namely Arnold Schwarzenegger, learning happens when you do reps, reps, reps. And there are roughly 2 ways to get enough repetitions so that you learn for good. One of them is that we need to live in North Korea. A strong enough discipline will teach people good. That's a fact. The only problem is that if we have strong enough discipline, people will also learn to hate what they know, what they can do. And they will learn to avoid it at any cost as soon as the discipline is removed. Well, that's not the kind of learning we want in a world that's constantly changing faster and faster and faster. In a world that's constantly changing, like Eric Hoffer once said, in a changing world, it is the learners who inherit the world, and the learned find themselves perfectly accustomed to a world that no longer exists. So we need to learn to learn. And to do that, we need to learn to love to learn. And that happens when we find flow in learning, when we find intrinsic motivation in learning, when we love what we do. This is Paavo. Paavo is my younger brother. One of the most substantial theses that arose from the research that we did for Rovio was that there are no stupid people, period. That's a fundamental, as a philosopher would say, ontological fact. There do not exist such creatures as stupid people in the universe. There are simply people who can do and people who can't yet do. Paavo, I'm from a relatively big family. There's a total 8 of us. Paavo is the 5th youngest. And different from all of the other of us siblings who were pretty good at school, Paavo sucked at school. And by the time when he was on the 8th grade, one day after the class, his math teacher came to this boy who was struggling to get by in the school, pulled him aside, and when everybody else had left the room, she said to him, "Listen, Paavo, promise to me that today after school you will go to the hardware store and buy a shovel, because that is the only thing you will ever amount to in your life." And this 14-year-old kid was devastated. But Paavo was lucky. Unlike so many other people who are still out there who never get the chance to find what they truly love. Paavo was lucky because one day he happened to turn on the TV. Just like that. And on the TV there was a documentary by BBC on digital imaging. And this 14-year-old kid was mesmerized. He watched the documentary, pulled everything in. He was completely blown away. There's something like this that you can do in the world. Now, unlike the school, our parents were fortunately encouraging, and when our dad found out that Paavo was interested in digital imaging, he installed Photoshop and Painter Pro on our home PC. And Paavo, who was told constantly to be stupid, lazy, and a very difficult pupil, he would work 14 hours non-stop on the computer creating those images of his. And my dad once, when he'd worked until the midnight on a Saturday without taking a bathroom break, without eating anything, and he came to him and said, "You know, it's very hard to imagine how anybody could think of you as lazy after all that hard work you've put into this." After high school, Paavo founded a little company, and I remember him telling me, "Listen, Lauri, people actually pay me money for doing these images." And I can tell you it wasn't a lot of money that he made. Then he went to work for a very small company, an ad agency in Helsinki, Finland. The company started growing, and in 2011, Paavo was one of the lead designers for that company, which was then chosen as #1 ad agency in Finland. And on the spring of that year, he won the Webby Award, which is called the Oscar of the Internet, for a global campaign that he had designed for Nokia's Lumia phones. And Paavo quite seriously considered printing out a copy of that diploma, putting it in a frame, buying that shovel, and sending it to the math teacher. Paavo found his flow in graphic design. And this is the second big thesis. We don't need to be great at everything. It's enough that we find one single thing that we love to do. We don't need to win great awards even. It's enough that when we come to our work, to our daily chores on a Monday morning, that we feel that this is the thing that I want to do. And that's enough. And that's the kind of world that we need to start building by giving our people the chance to learn and the chance to discover what they want to learn. Another big realization from this spring was that learning games is not a category of games. It's an entire ecosystem. Now, I want to emphasize that learning games are not the be-all, end-all of future learning. Actually, even now, the best way to facilitate fantastic learning is to have a teacher who loves what they teach. That's still the best fun learning methodology in the world. But learning games, like I already mentioned, they intrinsically put people to flow. They help generate intrinsic motivation. Learning games are a huge wonderland of opportunities. And we need to define the ecosystem. Right now, in 2015, learning games are in an almost painstakingly similar situation as mobile games were in 2007. They're still a niche product. There's still, as we've seen through these 3 amazing days, there's already a lot of really interesting activity going on in this space, People are looking at it, people are writing about it, people are interested in it, but it's still not exploded. But we're this close to making that big explosion happen. From the field that I've got from being able to get to know various amazing learning game developers, of course by working with Rovio, but also by seeing the works done by Ubisoft, by Lego, by various other companies, and also small studios, I have a very strong intuition that in the next 3 to 24 months, we're going to see the definitive learning game. Just like Angry Birds defined the mobile game in 2009, or Clash of Clans defined the tablet game, and I had to put that watch there because I can see this like small trend there. There's a Finnish company who wants to define the wearable space called Everywhere. But right now, out there, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily going to be a Finnish company that's going to do this. There is probably already something in the works in one of these amazing teams that are working to bring about this fun learning revolution that's going to change everything. Think about it. Before 2009, mobile games were a niche product. They were something that scarce few people used, scarce few people had. Now everybody has a mobile game. And once one of these teams defines the learning ecosystem, everybody's going to have a learning game on their device, which means that everybody can learn everywhere instantly. You can have a go at it already if you want to check what this casual learning feels like. You can download, let's say, Duolingo to your mobile phone. It's an amazing language learning app. But I want to show you one example that completely blew me away and pretty much defined, to me personally, what the future of learning looks like before I stop. Because I believe that we are truly facing a fun learning revolution. We're facing a moment, a pivotal moment, when one of these games is going to hit mainstream big time. And what's going to happen is stuff that we haven't dared to dream about. When I was writing the book, in summer 2012, I did what any good, crazy scientist does. I experimented on my children. And what I did was I collected about 150 different learning games, I put them on an iPad, and I gave the iPad to my kids, and then monitored what happened. I gave absolutely no instructions, nothing, just gave the iPad to them, and went from there. So one day, Lucas, my 3-year-old son, was sitting on the couch, his eyes were lit up, he was in complete flow, he was completely mesmerized by what he was doing. And I went to see what's happening. And Lucas was playing a game developed by a very small Norwegian studio called We Want to Know. The game is called Dragon Box. If you haven't tried it out, please do. It's one of the most amazing learning games out there. And what my 3-year-old son was doing was solving equations that look like this. And it took him about 10 seconds to crack each. Now, when I wrote the book, I got the press release from Rovio announcing their collaboration with CERN. And the announcement read that this was actually by Rolf Landau, the head of education from CERN, the Center for Nuclear Research in Geneva. And the press release read that together with Rovio, CERN is going to teach children quantum physics. And I'm a researcher. I was like, yeah, right. But when I saw this, when I saw my 3-year-old boy cracking equations with 4 or 5 parameters in them, one after another, with his eyes lit up, he didn't even realize that he's learning algebra, for crying out loud. He was just having fun. That's when I realized that that's not such an exaggeration after all. This is the future of learning, learning where everybody can learn everywhere instantly, where we can actually start generating true and lasting lifelong learning, fun learning. I was completely blown away at the White House Game Jam when the event ended, and Richard Kulada, the director of the Office of Education Technology, ended the whole event with these words that I think completely define the future we're looking at, which is to say, We win when learning and fun are indistinguishable. Thank you very much.